Hi everyone, just come back doing a lab session. My partner Gatik and I run these labs for corporates where we get a team together, create a safe space so that people open up and have authentic conversations, have the courage of saying things that they wouldn't usually say at work, and then move out as a stronger, more cohesive, and harmonious team. And in some of the lab sessions, they're beautiful reminders for myself as well on how I operate and how I am in relationships and how I can work on relationships too. And today's reminder was more about letting go. Sometimes when we get hurt or when somebody does something that hurts us, we hold on to that incident. We hold on to the emotion for a much longer time. And what happens after that is when the person who's hurt us has done many things to make up or has moved on in supporting us, we miss those opportunities. We don't see the support coming. We don't see the love or compassion coming because we're holding on to an incident that happened some time ago. And that's because we've not been able to close that loop. And because we're not able to close that loop, there is a hole inside us that doesn't allow us to move forward. And what it does in the end is you miss out on opportunities, you miss out on the love, you miss out on the compassion, you miss out on a beautiful budding relationship because we just did not have the courage to have that conversation at that point of time. One thing I've realized is it doesn't take too much courage to have these conversations. Yes, it feels difficult. It feels huge going to the person who hurt you and say, hey, you know what? You hurt me when you said this or when you did this. But when you eventually do it, there is so much of relief. There is so much of trust that starts building. There's so much of opportunities that you get in creating a beautiful relationship that we would have lost just because we didn't take that extra step, that little bit of courage of having that conversation. So, my invitation and wish for all of you is can you think of a conversation that needs to be closed, a loop that needs to be discussed, sharing with somebody who hurt you, but also sharing your intention, what you want to do with that relationship? So experiment a little, see what that gives you. Take a baby step because that will take you to much larger, much tougher steps. So happy experimenting. All the courage is within you. Take care. I've just finished a coaching session with a client who is an entrepreneur who runs a business. And we were talking about his fear of confronting a partner and how that fear is stemming from confronting somebody who is his equal in terms of power and also where the stakes are high. And what was the impact of that on him in his well-being and also the organization, success of the organization. Very often, fear stops us from doing something that unleashes a potential in us or unleashes a capability within us to get what we want. That's fear's way of protecting us to get into something that's completely uncomfortable, to get into something that's new, that could be dangerous for us, or something that could risk a loss, whether it's a loss of reputation, whether it's loss of finance, or maybe even loss of life. So that's fear's protective mechanism. Now, in some cases, it helps us especially when you are in a forest in the middle of the night and you have a sense or fear of I shouldn't be going at a certain place because you want to physically protect yourself, then yes, you should listen to your fear and be safe. But in most situations in our everyday lives, fear plays a role of disablement. It disables us to achieve a goal or disables us to do something that we really want to do or to get a gain that we've not even fathomed. So while I was working on this topic, and fear is something that I have a very close relationship with. In fact, my whole childhood, adolescence, early adult years have been ruled by fear, where fear guided me in directions most often I didn't want to get into. Until I've came across a process to have an understanding with fear and then have a couple of tricks and tips to overcome fear. In my mind, I have just 3 simple tips whenever I get into the zone of fear. The first tip is prepare myself for the battle, which is mindset, is to acknowledge the presence of fear, say, yes, you are there, and it's okay for you to be there because you are playing a role, in whether it's to protect me or to keep me safe. So acknowledge your presence. But also in that mindset and that conversation I have with fear, I also tell it that this is something that I want badly enough to overcome even you. So in my initial years of public speaking, I had a lot of beliefs and stories, internal narratives that had all the right reasons for me not to go up on stage. But then I reached a stage where I really wanted it bad enough and acknowledged the presence of fear and said, you know what? The risks are worth it. I'm going to just go and do it. And that is usually the biggest piece of overcoming fear. It's a mindset, because it's not just one conversation. You just keep coming back to it, and then you reach a state where you either give up or you take action. That's number 2. When you take action, when you do it, that's when you really overcome fear. It's not the mindset conversations only. It's when you go and do that action. For example, again, in my case, when I stood up on the stage, when I felt the nervousness, I felt the sweat in my hands, where I forgot my entire script, I stumbled, I couldn't even speak fluently. That was my action bit of overcoming stage fright. And then the last step to overcome fear is consistency. Because guess what? When people say you do it once, you get it, it's not always true. You can still go through the whole fear for the second time again. But if you do it consistently is when you reduce fear. So when I did it for the first time on stage, yes, I was fearful. I was frozen. I forgot to even carry the mic with me when I went up on the stage, and I had to fumble to get the mic. So it was quite a funny incident the first time. The second time when I tried again, there was obviously lesser work in convincing my mindset. My action was a little better, although I still feared, I still stumbled, but more or less it was better than my first time. The third, fourth, and fifth time, I started getting close to enjoying it and loving what I was getting out of it, and enjoying the attention, and enjoying people receiving my message, and enjoying and accepting their presence when they say that they've got something from your message, and the sense of fulfillment you get. And that happens when you consistently do it. When fear gets the message that this is no longer I need to protect you from, that you've got it. Those are, my dear, 3 steps to overcoming fear. Your mindset, doing it, action, and finally be consistent. So wishing you all the best, and let's overcome that fear for you. I had heard this story about a king and his elephant some time ago, and just this morning it came to my mind while I started working. And I thought I'll share this with all of you because the story really inspired me today to do something meaningful and to do something different. And the story goes like this. There was once a king who waged a lot of war, and therefore he had many elephants that went with him to war. But there was this one elephant that was his favorite. And this elephant was large, big, really strong, and really fearless. And this elephant was responsible for many victories for the king. And so the king loved this elephant the most. But over the years, the elephant grew old, and the elephant had to be withdrawn from war and kept aside in his palace, well taken care of, but was no longer taken to war. And very soon the elephant started aging, started feeling demotivated, and then one fine day, while it was going to its swamp to have water, it found itself sinking into a swamp of water, and it couldn't get itself out. And so the news went to the king that his favorite elephant was sinking. Nobody could help it. The king came, his ministers came, and all his soldiers came. They tried to pull this elephant out of the swamp, but the elephant being so heavy, it was very difficult for them to bring the elephant out. And so they were all helpless, just looking at the elephant there, just sinking in deeper into the swamp. And then suddenly one minister came up to the king and gave him an idea, and told him to get all the war drums together and start beating the war beats. And the king thought it was a very funny idea, but tried it out anyway. And so his war drums were called out, and the sound of the war beats started reverberating through the drums right to the elephant's ears. And when the elephant heard those beats, it felt so powerful and found energy and motivation in his weak body that on its own he struggled out of the swamp and came out into safe land. And they were all surprised to look at how this old elephant, who didn't have the energy early, came out on its own without any help. And the story leaves a message for me. Sometimes we may feel that we've run out of energy, we've run out of motivation, we've run all kinds of paths and failed, and there's nothing left inside us. But sometimes we need to get those war drums inside, those drums calling out for action that helped us come out of the zone in the past, that inspires us so much that it overcomes the physical weakness that we may feel. And it tells us there is more to us than what we tell ourselves or what our body tells us. So my invitation to all of you, like I did for myself this morning, is to find that music, to find that inspiration, to find the internal mantra to get us out of this zone. Whether it's a zone of depression, whether it's a zone of sadness, zone of victimhood, zone of I've tried everything, it's not going to work. And bring ourselves out, because there is so much more within us and so much more that we are capable of, that only if we let ourselves unleash would we be able to live in full glory. So I hope this message brings some meaning for you, and I wish you all the very best.